Welcome to the Buddhistisches Tor Berlin podcast. Join us for live recordings from classes, insightful talks, and guided meditations.
So today I kind of wanted to look at a kind of simple theme, relatively simple theme, and that is, what does it mean to be upright? Yeah, I mean, we know what it means to be upright, but upright in a kind of, I guess you'd say, a moral, psychological sense. What does it mean to be upright? In Buddhism, this is a huge part of Buddhism. Yeah, how do you actually become upright? You could say, in a way, it's the goal as well. Yeah, one of the words for the Buddha's enlightened disciples was the Arya Sangha. Arya means noble. Yeah, so noble. It's a similar thing to do the uprightness, dignity, all these kind of things. And I'm not sure why, but it seems, for me at least, it seems especially important at the moment. The way things are in the world, yeah. And I think it's quite strange, because on the way here I felt quite emotional about giving this talk somehow, and I realised this is a kind of area that is or has been close to my heart for a long time. And I think it kind of starts with another question earlier in my life, which is not really, it wasn't a conscious question, it was more like an impulse, which was something like, how do you deal with the horrors of this life? Yeah, how do you kind of deal with all these things, these kind of nightmarish scenarios and difficult things, and how would I respond? How are you supposed to respond? And if I look at my own life, I think really there's two answers, which hopefully will unfold a bit. But my first answer was just to harden up. Yeah, I felt soft. I felt a bit oversensitive. You know, I felt like I couldn't cope with this world. There's all this violence and these dangerous people around, and so my initial response was to harden up, and I think develop the ability to turn my sensitivity off. Yeah, so to be able to not necessarily become violent myself, but at least be in a violent world and feel like cocooned from it somehow. Yeah, just to harden up. But that doesn't work in the long run, and that whole way of approaching life, for me, at a certain point, just kind of broke down. Yeah, I was training, I was doing all this stuff, and trying to become bulletproof and fearless, and it just gave way at a certain point, and I found myself more worried and full of anxiety than I was before about the state of this world. And I think that's what led me to Buddhism, basically. Yeah, looking for a kind of question of how you're supposed to be in this world. So we have two options, and it's kind of appealing, isn't it? You can harden up, you don't feel so much, you feel like basically it's about you and your immediate circle, and you're going to protect yourself and them and get what you need, and everyone else can kind of, they're on the periphery of your consciousness, it doesn't really matter about them. Yeah. But it doesn't really work, and I think it doesn't work in a major way. And I have to say, I'm a bit late to the game, but I read Man's Search for Meaning by a guy called Viktor Frankl, who many of you will know, recently, and it really blew me away, I have to say. Like, it's extraordinary. He was an Austrian Jew in the 30s, and he became a neurologist, psychiatrist. He ended up in Auschwitz, yeah? Lost everything, lost everyone he loved, lost everything he loved, and somehow managed to go through literally hell on earth, retaining his dignity and retaining his, you could say, uprightness, yeah? Which I'd heard about this book and I'd heard about him over the years, and it seemed almost too fantastical. I thought, this is impossible. But that's what happened to him. So I thought I'd just begin by reading a couple of his quotes. And maybe before that, I think the effect of reading this book as well is it reminded me of the kind of importance of having, maybe heroes is not quite the right word. Yeah, we're a very anti-hero culture. We don't like heroes. We like to pull everyone down and see all their faults and all the bad things, and they're just like us and we're all the same, and that's what we like to do. But it's important. Reading this book, I thought this person is clearly worthy of my kind of adoration. Yeah, not blind adoration. I don't even need to kind of go further with that. But someone that you can look to and be like, this is really someone that I admire. Yeah, in our culture, maybe not you lot here, but in general, we kind of admire, or we seem to kind of admire rich people, famous people. You know, we've got all sorts of people that we admire, but in terms of people that have backbone and kind of uprightness and you say moral strength, it's not really at the forefront of our culture in a super strong way. So I think it's important to at least find people like that, yeah? Because the truth is, you will be tested in this life. We all get tested one way or another. And it's probably important to realize that we're not as great and as nice people as we think we are. You know, I wrote in the WhatsApp group about my gourmet breakfast I went to. I generally consider myself to be a kind of fairly kind and reasonable person, yeah? I was waiting for this breakfast, and then this couple, as I said in this WhatsApp text, this couple came in. They both had matching long light brown puffer jackets, and I was already suspicious. And they just came in front of us and went into the cafe, one of these cafes where you have to queue for these fancy breakfasts. I was incandescent, full of rage. This like dark, murderous cloud came over me, and I had to wait for an extra 3 minutes outside. And then I got my table, and it was my rage and bad mood was ridiculous, as it always is. It was pathetic. But it kind of makes you realize, you think, that was just being made to wait outside for 3 minutes for a fancy breakfast. So you will get tested, and it's good to know. Or maybe there's some work, you know, maybe we need to take this seriously, because maybe when you get tested, that's when it all comes out. And that seems to be Viktor Frankl's experience, you know, in Auschwitz, for example. People, what they were like already, they came in that way, and that's what happened to them. Some of them were already kind of caring about other people, were kind of upright, and whether they lived long or not is irrelevant, but they maintained that. Other people had kind of were a bit off key, to say it that way, and they got even more off key. So anyway, I just say that. So yeah, a couple of quotes from Viktor Frankl.
And what's the name of the author again?
Viktor Frankl. Great. So this is him writing after his experience. There are two races of men in this world. He's talking in old-fashioned, we don't need to go on. Anyway, there are two races of men in this world, but only these two. The race of the decent man and the race of the indecent man. Both are found everywhere. They penetrate into all groups of society. No group consists entirely of decent or indecent people. In this sense, no group is of pure race. Yeah, I'll read that again. There are two races of men in this world, but only these two. The race of the decent man and the race of the indecent man. Both are found everywhere. They penetrate into all groups of society. No group consists entirely of decent or indecent people. In this sense, no group is of pure race. Yeah, so that's the first quote. And the second one, which I thought was fantastic, was, well, I would say, going back to my own life, I think we're all fairly similar. I think I was interested in two things. One was, how do you deal with the horrors of this world? Yeah. And the other one was, how do you fulfill yourself, yeah, creatively, or free yourself from your anxiety, your restrictions? How do you flow? How do you be in this world fully alive? Yeah. So this second quote relates to this as well, though, somehow. Yeah. So he says, freedom is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness, which means something like your whim, randomness, just what you want. Freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. That is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a statue of responsibility on the West Coast. I thought that was great. Yeah. So, in a way, we all want freedom. We all want to be free. We don't want restrictions on us. And that's fantastic.
Can you read the quote?
The second quote, yeah. Freedom is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere arbitrariness, like a whim, randomness, unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. This is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. So, we'll get into this later in terms of Buddhist ethics, but in a way, it's not enough to just have laws. Laws, you can't really hold a culture together with law alone, yeah? There has to be a sense of your own responsibility, obviously, what you bring to the table, not just what other people shouldn't do, but what you bring. And how you affect other people, yeah? Your effect, your ripple out into the world. It's obviously a manifestation of your inner state, the way you treat other people. And it's also what makes a kind of cohesive society possible. Yeah, the more you kind of reach out into the world and take responsibility for the world around you, the more you have something with cohesion. Yeah, duties, an unpopular word, but our teacher says we should think more in terms of like duties rather than rights. Nothing wrong with rights; human rights are crucial, but duties, not such a popular word these days. Are equally important, maybe more important, yeah, to have a sense of duty towards your people, your culture around you, yeah. So, really, I just wanted to explore this whole business of being upright from a Buddhist perspective, you could say, yeah. So, well, he calls it decent and indecent, yeah. You could call it, in Buddhism, noble and ignoble, Arya and, I guess, Arya, yeah? Or you could call it upright and spineless, or spineless, rather. So maybe what does it mean to be spineless? That's fairly, we have great characters in our literature and culture. We kind of know what it means to be spineless, yeah? I kind of know when I'm being spineless. Doesn't feel good. But it kind of, I think I got into a bit of a poetic flow in the WhatsApp group, but it's kind of, yeah, you're either a bully or a bitch or a coward or a snitch. And they all kind of communicate something, yeah? It's all about you all the time. Me. And the world exists to give me what I want, and anything that gets in the way of that is a problem, yeah? So it's kind of, you will just fold and bend and do whatever it takes to get your way. Yeah, and this is why I was so struck as well reading Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl's book, just by listening to his accounts of people that did not do that, and that would go around and give literally their last piece of bread to people that were hungry, knowing that that would have a very negative effect on them, working in sub-zero conditions and being malnourished anyway, but they would do that. And there was cases in his own life where he chose what you could say the right thing to do, thinking, and then he was at ease. Funnily enough, he said then he was at ease afterwards, even if it meant, okay, I'm not going to escape, but I'm going to look after my patients because they need me. He was then happy afterwards. Like, even if I died today because of that, I've done the right thing. And he had a kind of sense of peace. He said he never felt so good. Yeah, so there's a kind of, anyway. But, so we all kind of know what it means to be spineless, yeah? It's not a nice feeling, is it? When you find yourself kind of gossiping about somebody or poisoning the water against somebody or something, you could have done something for somebody and you're like, I don't really have time, anyway, they're a stranger. You kind of feel it internally, don't you? And, it's pathetic, but a couple of days ago I had such a great day because I was preparing for this talk and there was this guy with a pram going up the stairs. I don't know if I normally just don't worry about, but the opportunity came for me to say to him, "Oh, do you need help with your pram up the stairs?" And he was so thankful, and I felt great. I was like, took the pram up, And then I let someone go in front of me in front of the door, and I said, oh, I feel much better. It's like, why don't I do this all the time? I felt like I liked myself, you know. Yes. So in Buddhism, uprightness. Basically, in Buddhism, you could say uprightness, what gets called ethics, although ethics sounds like a bit of an abstract word. I've never really liked the word ethics. I don't know, I always found it a bit kind of like, oh, I'm stuck into a box now and I have to behave in a certain way, which maybe is good to do sometimes, actually. But ethics, you could more say it's behavior, yeah? It's basically how you behave, yeah? It's your life. Yeah, maybe you spend an hour a day meditating, maybe more, maybe less, something like this. But the rest of your life, that's your life. It's your decisions, yeah? Everything that you're doing, it's your behavior. And in Buddhism, ethics is the absolute foundation, yeah? It's the bedrock. So, this term Arya, it's basically... It's the path, yeah. So you're on the Aryan Eightfold Path. You're on the path. It's also this word Arya, nobility, communicates a state of attainment. So someone has become noble, yeah. Someone's become noble by, well, transcending their selfishness, you could say. And it's also important to know that when the Buddha was talking about this word Arya or nobility, which I'm just calling uprightness, he was very clear that it was not tied to birth. Yeah, it's not your birthright. You're not born noble, which in those days was kind of radical. Yeah, maybe I don't know how radical it is for us. Probably not. But in those days, extremely radical to say your birth means nothing. It doesn't matter where you come from. It's what you become, basically. Yeah, it's like you become noble by your own actions in this world. Yeah, so it's an incredibly important aspect of Buddhism. Like I say, it's the beginning, it's the foundation, and maybe it's even the end as well. So it's the foundation, it's the attainment, and it's also not a birthright. Yeah. So So I'll just read a quote from the Buddha, which says, "Virtue, or maybe we could say ethics, uprightness. Virtue is the foundation, mindfulness is the protector, and wisdom is the ultimate aim of all wholesome states. These three lead one to the highest freedom." Yeah, so virtue is the foundation, and you have to protect that. You have to protect your, and you have to be aware. It's like this mindfulness is a protection. Yeah, you're aware of what you're about to do and what you've just done. You have a whole sense of the past and the future, and it's a kind of protection. It keeps you safe from doing stupid things, basically. And, we'll see why it's the foundation, because on that basis, you can kind of have a clear heart, a clear mind, yeah? And then you can meditate. So in Buddhism, you have the threefold path, yeah? If you want to talk about the foundation of Buddhism, Lala Taratna always says it's like not a Christmas cake, a wedding cake, that's it, it's a wedding cake. So you have the foundation, yeah? The foundation of that cake is ethics, yeah? And then on top of that, the next layer is meditation, yeah? And then the third layer, the little one at the top, is wisdom, yeah? So you have ethics, meditation, wisdom. And it's absolutely foundational because, if you look at your own experience, when you're meditating, maybe you're meditating today, I'm not going to judge you. I was not meditating very well. And the reason for that was a kind of scattered mind, yeah? It almost always inevitably, when you come to meditate, you meet the rest of your life, yeah? We like to think we have our little apps and we can just technique our way into enlightenment and just like be all doing our regular stuff, and then at the same time be super spiritual and meditate, and then, we're killing it, or we're optimizing, yeah? And Buddhism's not, it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. It's you need the whole of yourself, and because in a way it's like the reason you can't meditate is because of the rest of your life. So it's a bit difficult. And we were talking about this in our study group, but in traditional cultures, in traditional Buddhist cultures, you do your ethics bit. Yeah, you come in. They would, you can forget meditation. Yeah, you're not ready. So it's just like you need to sort yourself out, basically. Yeah, you need to become the kind of person that you like, where you look in the mirror and you're like, yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, you feel good. Your mind is calm. It sounds like a fantastical dream to us, doesn't it? But your mind is calm. You feel good about yourself. You're not full of busy thoughts. You're not full of like toxic digital sewage. And you're behaving in a way that you're happy with, yeah? Your actions match your beliefs, put it that way, yeah? So you start to feel good about yourself, your mind is calm, and when you come to meditate, you can just meditate, you're straight in. For most of us when we're meditating, at least in my experience, when I'm meditating, a lot of the times I'm dealing with hindrances, things that pop up into my mind, things I've forgotten to do, things that I shouldn't have done, all kind of things, yeah? So ethics is the foundation on that front, because then you have a clear conscience. I know it's not nice to hear this, but that's just the way it is. It's like, and what we do, we normally come to a place like this, and we begin with meditation. Yeah, we're like, I want to meditate. And not only that, we want the wisdom as well. We want to be like super wise and meditate and be like. So we're straight into the goodies. We're like all that other stuff, the ethics, that's for kind of slow people and. I'm going to hack this and I'm going to conquer this and make it work. So that's how we approach it, yeah? And then we slam into a brick wall, which is our life, yeah? So it's just like, then we're like, oh, right, maybe I have to look at my life and do something about the way I'm behaving and then you go, it's like snakes and ladders, and you go all the way back down and you start with basics again, yeah? Which we'll look at later, yeah? The kind of foundations. So we, like it or not, we have to go through this process if we want to meditate. And the Buddha would say, if we want to attain wisdom, we still have to go through this. Yeah, you can't just jack your way in there. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So it's big. It's very, very big. So in order to meditate, in order to step onto the threefold path, we need to look at our behavior. Yeah, and just to make it clear, in Buddhism, we don't have this original sin, which is great. You're not a lowly worm. You weren't born as a degenerate, horrible piece of vermin, and that you need to there's none of that. It's just training, yeah? There's a very pragmatic side to Buddhism. You're training. You're a bit of a mess. You are, I am. And you just train, yeah? You're like, I can become something better, in the deeper sense, yeah? So you need, and that's literally what it's called. It's the training, yeah? It's not moralizing. No one's standing there waving their finger at you, In Buddhism, the words good and bad, they don't really exist in the same way when it comes to this area. It's more skill. It's called skillful and unskillful, yeah, which is good. It's a skill. It's a training. It's something you learn, but it has a very strong moral component. It's not like a normal skill in that sense. It's kind of a bit more than that. Okay, so I hope that's clear why it's important. On one level. Another reason it's important, why it's the foundation, is because in order to practice Buddhism, you need energy. Yeah, I know Buddhism has a terrible public image of being people kind of just like chilling out, and there's some nice stones with water on it and flowers, and everyone's like, and they're in a spa. That's great. I would like to have that feeling internally a bit more. Unfortunately, I don't. But anyway, it has a very bad image. Yeah, but Buddhism's about energy, yeah? And this is one of the reasons I got more attracted to it in the end, because I thought it was all about repression, like you just kind of put yourself into a box, you try and behave holy, and I don't know. It was all a bit dead to me, but actually it's about energy. And the thing, maybe that we're not so familiar with it, but so the Buddha gets described as being wise, yeah? There's wisdom there, there's compassion there, and they're normally the two things we think of when we think of the Buddha. But actually there's a third component which for some reason doesn't get mentioned that much or isn't that popular, is energy, yeah? Energy is one of the three aspects of a Buddha. It's like infinite energy, yeah? Which is where later Buddhism, the Tantra, the Vajrayana, they kind of really emphasize energy, a whole way of working with energy, yeah? So in order to practice Buddhism, you need energy, yeah? And how do you get energy? Well, you get energy through behaving in a way that aligns with your beliefs. Yeah? If you have your kind of highest principles, and you're behaving in line with them, And you don't have to constantly wrestle with your conscience. You don't have to be like, oh, I really want to do this, but I should do that. And you're not pulled apart. Your energy isn't leaking out. You're not completely distracted. Yeah. So if you want energy, you do need to practice ethics. So maybe I'll just kind of illustrate this. So when I first got into Buddhism, probably in my early, mid-20s, I think my energy was flowing quite well. Yeah. If someone cut me up in traffic, if someone wronged me, bam, no problem. And like I say, I trained myself in a certain sense to remove my heart out of the equation, which was even better because then anything's on the table, anything can happen to someone. And it's like, who cares? Yeah. So my energy was flowing. I was like, I wanted to get for me. I wanted it my way, my world, my family, friends, and that was it. And I felt like I was able to maneuver. And then I got into Buddhism, and it felt like a big gate came down. And I suddenly kept banging up against this thing called ethics, yeah, which was like, oh, maybe it's not okay to talk to people like this, and maybe it's not okay to do other things. Yeah, so, and my energy fell off. And I said to my friend who got me into Buddhism, this is really weird. Like, I used to have loads of energy, and now I feel like lethargic. I'm just like, and he said, oh, yeah, that happened to me. It took me 10 years to get my energy back. And I was like, okay. That's a long time. He's like, yeah. But then he said when it did come back, then it really came back. It was like I had none of that whispering in the back of my head like, is this good? Ooh, maybe I should put the brakes on. No, but I want it. Brakes on. None of that. You can flow, yeah? So he said it took him 10 years. Unfortunately for me, it took me like 20. So, sorry about that. Sorry too. Anyway, but it's taken a long time, and I feel like I'm beginning to get my energy back. Maybe not even physical energy, but psychophysical energy, you might say, yeah? Which is really important. So it's really important that if you want energy, your actions and your beliefs need to align. It can't just be ideas, yeah? And that's really, really hard work. It's not just about putting on a Buddhist badge and a Buddhist name and saying, oh, it has to work from the depths, yeah? So another way of saying this as well is, in a way, if you're getting into meditation at any depth, and especially wisdom, you're stepping into the unknown, yeah, by definition, because we're not wise most of the time. And in terms of transcendental wisdom, it's an unknown. Even when you start meditating, and you get those lucky meditations where somehow your good merit, it all comes together and you have a kind of mind-expanding experience, it's the unknown, yeah? And in order to explore the unknown, I would say, and be transformed by those kind of experiences, you obviously need to know yourself. So you need to know yourself first before stepping into something completely unknown. Because if you're unknown to yourself, and then you step into the unknown, you don't really know what's going on from personal experience. So it's just like, you're meditating, and all of a sudden you come to a certain... But there may be fear there as well. And you can't tell if it's you thinking, if it's fear from bad things you've done in the past, like, you get haunted by things you've done, or if it's existential fear, just the nature of things like infinity and being alive and consciousness. So in a way, if you clear up your consciousness like that, then I think when you step into those unknown spaces, unfamiliar spaces rather, then you have a much better chance at navigating and kind of being able to be like, oh, this is okay, this is just fear, existential fear, this is fine. And it might not be connected to some other part of your psychology, yeah? Therapy is fantastic. Things like this, we explore our mind. But from a Buddhist perspective, ethics is super important. And in a certain sense, the meditation and the wisdom are sexy. They're like, wow, yeah. You can tell everyone about these exciting meditations. But from where we are, I would say ethics is where the transformation happens. Yeah. In a way, it's kind of more. It says more about how somebody is aware of the teacups and cleans them up afterwards than telling you about how they went into the different infinite plane of no sphere and had an amazing experience in their meditation, yeah? Both together is ideal, but in a way you learn more about people from the basics, yeah? So, in a way, ethics is where we kind of, we clean up our act, we get to a certain level of consciousness where we're kind of happy with ourselves, yeah? Life is okay. We look in the mirror, we like ourselves, and then when we come down to meditate, we're not full of distractions and recriminations and, yeah. And this is normally the place where most people leave in the West, yeah. They get to a certain point where they're happy, they can now be in the world how they wanted to be in the world, thank you Buddhism. Then they're like, yeah, but it doesn't really work, anyway. And they go and do their thing, fine. It worked to some degree, it kind of helped people feel happier. You know, a comical Buddha would be like, okay. Because it's literally just the beginning. Yeah, you found the first part, which was a general baseline level of happiness and feeling good, yeah? And that's then used to meditate and really free yourself, to liberate yourself, yeah? So it's literally the foundation, not the end. Yeah. And maybe finally, why it's important and why it's the foundation is because in a way it's to do with friendship. You know, you can't really be a friend to people if your ethics are all over the place. It's just not possible. There has to be some kind of, it has to be in play, doesn't it? Your behavior, the way you think about yourself in relation to other people and the way you treat other people. You can't really be a friend to somebody unless you know how to be a friend to them, yeah? And that requires self-reflection, action, all these kind of things, yeah? So in a way, I think ethics makes it possible to be a friend to people, to be a friend to strangers as well, which I find really inspiring in Buddhism. That's the whole point, in a sense, to being able to potentially be a friend to a stranger, yeah? Yeah, so, and in a way, well, the Buddha said friendship is the whole of the spiritual life, yeah? So it's the beginning, you know, you could say friendship is the goal, yeah? You've attained enlightenment, you're free, and then you're a friend to people. But you need... Anyway. So anyway, I just wanted to say, just for maybe for my own benefit, but there's kind of 3 levels to ethics as well, yeah? Which I find quite, that Sangharakshita, the founder of this order and movement, went through, which I find really helpful, yeah? Maybe it's clear, but ethics isn't about becoming a kind of stiff, moralizing, kind of buttock-clenching, religious weirdo, yeah? Just to be clear about that. That's not what it's about. It's not about casting blame on other people. It's not about wagging your finger. Maybe you have to restrain yourself, but at the end of the day, at times, until a new pattern emerges, but it's basically about freedom, yeah? It's about liberating yourself from all these things that are holding you back, yeah? That said, I like this, there's 3 levels, yeah? Which they're quite simple and quite neat, but they tell you everything. So he talks about the absolute lowest level of ethics, yeah? Is what you would call conventional ethics, yeah? Conventional morality, yeah? Which is basically the law, yeah? You would like to do this thing, you would really like to do this thing, but it's illegal. Oh, yeah, you're really disappointed. You want to do it. You really want to do this thing, but it's against the law. That's a shame. Or you think, if I do it, then it's socially unacceptable, and people won't like me, so I won't do it because I want people to like me. Yeah. So there's that. That's the absolute lowest level of ethics. It's basically a legalistic level. It's a kind of social level, yeah? So it's legal and social, yeah? But you still want to do it. You really want to do it. Okay. That's the lowest level. The second level is, you could call it intentional ethics, yeah? You want to behave well, yeah? You really do want to behave well, but it's still a struggle, yeah? You're still split, you know? You want to kind of behave in a way that you find is upright and dignified and noble, but you're still wrestling with it because you have other things that you would like to do, or you have other ideas about people where you think, oh, who cares about this person? No, I should care. No, who cares? Oh, I should care. You have this back and forward, yeah? So it's better than the first level, yeah? At least you want to do something, but you're wrestling. The third level is natural ethics, where, I mean, you must have had that experience at some point in your life where you're just behaving in a way, you didn't think about it, you didn't have to think about it, but you just behaved well, yeah? You did the right thing at the right time and you felt good afterwards. Yeah, it was natural. And so we're kind of aiming for that, and that's how Buddha is said to respond to the world, yeah? He doesn't have to wrestle with his conscience, he doesn't have to check what the law says, he's just behaving just naturally. It's just your default, yeah? Which would be incredible, because the taste of it you have on a day-to-day basis feels so good that to be like that on a more permanent basis would be incredible, yeah? So, nearly finished. But just to wrap it up, I think I'll just, very briefly look at what are called the 5 precepts, because it's Buddhism is pragmatic. Yeah, it's kind of, it has been said in a way like Buddhism's kind of like 90% method. Yeah, you have kind of metaphysics, you have kind of ideas, but it's basically method, and you taste it for yourself, and then you take another step, and you taste it for yourself, and then you take another step, and that way you gain faith in Buddhism. Yeah, the faith in Buddhism is not something that you have to have or not have. It's kind of gained along the way. Yeah, you test it, you taste it, and you're like, oh, this works. Yeah. So there's different areas of life where you apply your mindfulness to, your consciousness to, and transform yourself in that light. Yeah. So very briefly, I just like to go through what are called the 5 precepts. Yeah. If you never heard that word, they're not commandments. It's not like the 10 Commandments. They're precepts. They're training principles. Yeah. They're principles that you take up and you work with. Like, so for example, I was getting depressed and lost looking at Instagram and the news. Yeah, this was going on for months, and I thought, why can't I? This is ridiculous. Yeah, why can't I stop looking at this horrible stuff? And so I made a precept with my friend, with Padmasambhava and Moksharati. I said, okay, for a week I'm not looking at this. Yeah, and that was my training. I know it's small, but it was like, okay, no Instagram, no Guardian. And then it worked, and now I don't do it anymore. So it's like you're just training yourself in certain different aspects of your life. Yeah. So the first of these, and maybe the foundation of all of them, is to do with kindness. Yeah. With deeds of loving kindness, I purify my body. Yeah. So you could say the rest of ethics comes out of this. It comes out of kindness. It comes out of a sense of, yes, kindness to yourself, but definitely also kindness towards other people. Yeah. However that manifests itself. Yeah. It's to do with uprightness again. Yeah. So the first one is kindness. And you're abstaining from harm, yeah, to say it in the more traditional negative terms. You're abstaining from harming living beings, yeah. So that's the first one. The second one is generosity, yeah. So, very simple. It's about today, in a way, we've got a whole thing going on for this retreat center we bought. It's to do with generosity, dana, yeah. All these classes, this whole center is run on a kind of principle of dana, of generosity, yeah, of giving what you can, yeah. Was it Marx that said, give what you can, take what you need? Doesn't matter. Anyway, that sort of thing, yeah. He said some good things. So just give what you can, yeah. Not taking what's not given. So it's not just not stealing, yeah. Not stealing is easy, that's legal, yeah, or it's obvious. It's not taking what someone hasn't freely given to you, yeah. So if someone's in the middle of work and you kind of burst in, oh, I would have went here and you talk to them and they're kind of like trying to work, you could be saying you're taking the not given, yeah. Anyway, so you could say that. The third one is with stillness, simplicity and contentment, yeah. In the negative, that's abstaining from sexual misconduct, but I think it's broader than that. This whole business of stillness, simplicity and contentment is probably all of our, in the 21st century, with our digital fizzy nastiness, is going to be a huge working ground for us, yeah. And probably one of the key factors why we can't meditate as well, apart from the rest of our life. But stillness, simplicity and contentment. We live in a culture that is, antithetical towards it. It's at war with this precept. Yeah? So we live in a culture that's at war with this precept. So we have to be aware of that. Yeah? We're working on where we put our attention. The fourth one is truthful speech. Yeah. So there's another set of precepts that elaborates on this. So you have truthful speech, you have kindly speech, you have helpful speech, and you have harmonious speech. Yeah. So basically, it's very difficult, but don't bend the truth. You know, it just makes it more complicated for us, doesn't it? You go down the road and you're like, oh God. Then someone's like, oh, but didn't you say this? And you're like, yeah, I said that. And they're like, you can't even remember, and you've got yourself into a whole lot of trouble. It's difficult. Again, it takes uprightness. It takes kind of backbone to be able to speak the truth, especially when you're scared to. Yeah, speaking the truth. Speak kindly. Yeah. Again, can be quite difficult if you're having a bad day, but try and speak kindly to people. Yeah. Again, truth is one of speech precepts are one of those main working grounds for us. Most of us thankfully at the moment, are not having to fight for food. Yeah? We're not having to fight for water or clothing. We're all pretty all right on that level. But we are still fully locked into the speech precepts. They'll be our main working ground, yeah? So speaking kindly to people. Being helpful with your speech. Don't just do verbal diarrhea, as they call it, yeah? Just try and be helpful with your speech. And maybe the fourth one, for me, the most important one, is harmonious speech, yeah? Which is incredibly difficult, but basically don't go bitching about people. It's really difficult, isn't it? You know, there's that Moorish quality, isn't it? You can partition someone out of your group by a few little words. And in Buddhist circles, we're quite good at this. We're quite like, oh yeah, I'm concerned about him. There's a lot of concern there. There's a lot of, yeah. And really what we've done is just like very subtly poison the water and like push this person over there, yeah? So, and it ruins a Sangha. And when I find myself doing it, I feel ashamed. It's horrible. So don't do that. And the last one is mindfulness, yeah? Mindfulness of everything. Ta-da! No, let me get mindfulness of your bodily movements. I'm losing altitude here. I'm tired. Anyway, mindfulness of your bodily movements, yeah? So you know what is going on. You have your kind of, and you're much more likely to act ethically if you know what's happening with your body. Have you ever noticed that? It's like, normally when I'm behaving in terrible ways, is I've lost my body. I don't have the feet. I don't have my feet on the ground. I don't have my bum on the thing. I'm not grounded. I'm not in my body. Yeah. So mindfulness of your body. Know what you're doing. How you're walking. Also, how you feel. You know, like your stomach's tense. It tells you stuff. Yeah. And you're much more likely to behave in ways that you're happy with if you know what's going on with your body. Yeah. And mindfulness of your surroundings. You know, this is a whole other talk, but I'm just going to skim through. But mindfulness of your surroundings, mindfulness of your emotions, your mental states, yeah? So it's a lot of work. And then there's an extra bit in Buddhism, which is mindfulness of what you could call the transcendental or the Dharma, reality, truth, yeah? So it's literally on every level of your experience. You're trying to just bring more awareness into that. And in a way, that's all ethics is, yeah? Ethics in Buddhism is basically about increasing awareness, yeah? Sangharakshita, the founder of this movement and order, said love is something like love is the awareness of another being, yeah, or another's being. So it's all there. Yeah, if love is the principal foundation of ethics, then awareness is the same thing. Yeah, so you become more aware, your body, your surroundings, people. You become more sensitive to them. You obviously start treating them better. You get more energy, clear conscience. You can meditate. You can meditate really well, you feel good, wisdom, ba-ding, enlightenment, and that's great. So, I think I'll finish by reading Viktor Frankl's quotes again, just because I think especially, you know, it's funny, people used to ridicule me for being apocalyptic, yeah? For years and years and years, everyone would ridicule me, and now I'm like, yeah, see, it's looking apocalyptic, I win. So it's not apocalyptic, I'm just saying. But I just feel sometimes it's like, I used to read about, you know, we've had it so easy, most of us, I'm not going to say for everyone, I mean, it's all relative as well, and that's one of the things Viktor Frankl makes a good point about, like, suffering's relative. He said, whatever small amount of suffering comes into someone's consciousness, they will magnify it, and it will become big suffering. And he was and this is someone you're going to listen to about suffering, yeah? So I was just, oh wow, it's true. He wasn't just trying to be nice to everybody that hadn't been through what he'd been through. It was more like, it exists, yeah? But I also think sometimes, wow, how is it possible to retain your dignity and your backbone when everything is asking you to behave otherwise, yeah? I'm not saying, I don't know how I'd respond in any of these kind of situations. None of us do. But I think having people like Viktor Frankl in mind and other heroes, I would say, in that way, is really, really important, because who knows how it all turns out, yeah? And there's more important things in play, isn't there? You know, like how you treat people. That's the kind of bedrock, really. It's much more important than the other things we normally get lost in, yeah? So I'm going to finish with Viktor Frankl's quotes, yeah? There are two races of men in this world, but only these two. The race of the decent man and the race of the indecent man. Both are found everywhere. They penetrate into all groups of society. No group consists entirely of decent or indecent people. In this sense, no group is of pure race. the second one. Freedom is not the last word. Freedom is only part of the story and half of the truth. Freedom is but the negative aspect of the whole phenomenon, whose positive aspect is responsibleness. In fact, freedom is in danger of degenerating into mere randomness, arbitrariness, unless it is lived in terms of responsibleness. That is why I recommend that the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. Thank you.